Ravens versus Jaguars. This is one of the biggest games of week 15. You got the Ravens coming in here who have only lost one game all year long on the road. Meanwhile, Jacksonville, they're not a great team defending their home territory, right? And this is a must-win game for Jacksonville. Houston is right on your trail, even if CJ Stroud doesn't play. If Houston loses this week without CJ Stroud, they still have a chance to take the AFC South from you next week, depending on how this game goes. So you need a win so you can stay one game ahead of Houston. Baltimore, they're trying to stay in control of the 1 seed in the AFC. Baltimore has been the best team in this conference all season long because they have a great defense. They can get after their quarterback. They got a great front seven. They're good against the run. Their secondary can give up a couple of big plays in the passing game here or there. And they did have probably their worst performance of the season last week against the LA Rams. But for the most part, Mike McDonald, their second-year defensive coordinator, he's done an outstanding job with this defense. And you got to feel really confident about how this defense can play against a Jaguars offense that's really volatile. And if you were to ask me to describe the Jags in one word, I would say volatility. Because that's what this team has been. One week, they look like one of the best teams in the NFL. And other weeks, they just underperform. Trevor Lawrence, I get that this dude is battling through an ankle sprain. Okay, like that injury that he suffered not too long ago, I believe it was against the Cincinnati Bengals. I didn't even think this dude was going to be able to play last week, but he did. But he threw 3 interceptions. And those 3 interceptions didn't have a damn thing to do with his injury. I mean, 2 of those interceptions he threw it perfectly to the defender. It's like the defender was playing wide receiver. One of those interceptions was miscommunication, but it goes to my point. Jacksonville's offense is extremely volatile because when they're on, they're nearly the best offense in the league. But when they're off, they're turning the football over, they're shooting themselves in the foot. What Jags team are we going to get in this game? All right, are we going to get the Jags team that we saw last week against the Cleveland Browns when they're just handing out turnovers like they're Santa's helpers? Are we going to get the Jags team that we saw earlier into this season when they looked like one of the best teams in the NFL when they beat Pittsburgh on the road in Pittsburgh, when they beat the Buffalo Bills 25-20 and they smashed the Indianapolis Colts and the Tennessee Titans? Is that going to be the version of Jacksonville that we see in this game? Or are we going to see the Jags team that got blown the hell out by the 49ers? And remember that when the 49ers beat Jacksonville 34-3, Jacksonville was at home. So this team doesn't do a really good job at defending home field. The Ravens, this is a team that you can't afford to have an off game. You can't afford to have a lot of costly turnovers because they're going to make you pay. Now, reasons for why Jacksonville can pull off this game is because Trevor Lawrence, despite how volatile this dude may be, when he's on, he's still as good as any other quarterback in the National Football League. Now, with that ankle injury, he should be a lot more healthier on that ankle this week than what he was last week when he was playing on it. Because as I mentioned earlier, I didn't know if this dude was even going to suit up again this season. I mean, this dude had to get helped off the field. Like, it looked really dark for Trevor Lawrence and the Jags at one point. So he definitely should be way more healthier going into this matchup than what he was last week against the Browns. Another thing that Jacksonville has going for them offensively is that you're going up against a defense that this secondary can get got. And you do have the talent to make some big plays in the pass game on this secondary. Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones. You also have Evan Ingram, who's going to be a mismatch nightmare for this Ravens offense to defend against. Well, maybe not, because they do got really good safeties, especially Kyle Hamilton. I want to see how the Ravens are going to defend against Evan Ingram, but there are a lot of weapons that the Ravens have to worry about stopping on this Jags offense. And if you get a Jags offense that hits the ground running into this game and they're not beating themselves, Jacksonville possibly could put 30 points on this Ravens defense, possibly have a similar performance to what the Rams had last week. Defensively, you know, the Ravens secondary has performed better statistically, and they've given up their fair share of big plays down the field. But Jacksonville's secondary, the same problem that they had last year, it's the same problem that they have this year. This secondary just isn't that good. And I know that they've had some big injuries that they've had to deal with. You know, they were down a couple of starters last week in their loss to the Cleveland Browns. But being down multiple starters still doesn't excuse you for getting your ass carved up by old-ass Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's damn near 40 years old. He's old enough to be my damn grandpa. And he was looking like the prime Joe Flacco that we saw when he led the Ravens to the Super Bowl a decade and a change ago. And they also got carved up by Jake Browning. So their last 2 weeks, this defense has gotten shredded by backup quarterbacks. And even when they're fully healthy, this defense, at least from a pass defense standpoint, still hasn't been all that great. You know, there's been miscommunication in the secondary at times, missed tackles. I don't really trust Jacksonville's pass defense in this game, but I do like their run defense. And I don't know how many of you guys know this, but they got one of the best run defenses in the whole entire NFL. They're fourth in the NFL against the run. And regardless of how great this passing attack for Baltimore has looked under new offensive coordinator Todd Monken, and all of the dynamic wideouts that Lamar Jackson has at his disposal with Rashad Bateman, OBJ has came on the last couple of weeks, and Zay Flowers. This is still a team that is going to be predicated off how much success they can have running the football. We talk about how great Lamar Jackson has with throwing the football, but something that doesn't get talked about a lot is how the Ravens are still the number one team in the league when it comes to running the football. They're number one in rushing yards per game. If you can slow down the rushing attack for Baltimore, you can find a way to pull off this win if you're Jacksonville. Look at when the Browns beat the Baltimore Ravens a couple of weeks back. You see, what the Browns did in that game is that they made Baltimore one-dimensional. Now, I'm not saying that Lamar Jackson isn't good enough to carry the Ravens to a win throwing the football, because he definitely is. But with that, based on what we've seen out of him in the past when the run game hasn't been there, he hasn't been as good. You see, against the Browns, when they lost 33-31, he threw 2 interceptions. One of those was really costly. If Jacksonville can make this a game where the Ravens can only move the ball, throwing the ball, this is a game where this defense can do what they do best. And what does Jacksonville's defense do best? They're not good at getting consistent pressure on the quarterback. They don't have a great secondary, but for some odd reason, they know how to force turnovers. The Jaguars are the best team in the NFL at forcing takeaways. And this was the same thing that this defense did last year. This is just a defense that has a nose for the football, and they have a nose at getting these big turnovers in crucial moments of the game. And maybe this game can go similarly to how that Dallas Cowboys game went last year. Because you remember, when Dallas had to go on the road and play Jacksonville, Dak Prescott threw a big interception, and it was to Rashawn Jenkins, and he had the game of his life. He had a pick six in overtime, which gave Jacksonville the W. You can slow down the run game against Baltimore, and you can force Lamar Jackson and company to have to beat you, go in air raid mode. You feel super confident about your defense being able to come away with a couple of stops. Now, Jacksonville's defense, I doubt that they're going to be able to hold the Ravens to under 17, 20 points in this game. We don't know who the hell is going to be starting in the secondary with the injuries that they have. And even if they are fully healthy, this secondary hasn't really been all that great when it comes to being able to slow down the passing game. But one thing that they do very well is stop the run and force turnovers. And turnovers is always an odd stat to judge a team upon, because turnovers are a thing that's a game-by-game basis. You can't say, oh yeah, like, we're going to get a turnover. You can't say the Jaguars are guaranteed to have a couple of turnovers just because they're number one in takeaways. You see, turnovers are just one of those stats that it doesn't always pop up consistently, like how their ability to stop the run does. But I do like their chances of being able to force Lamar Jackson into a couple of turnovers or two just based on his playing style. You see, Lamar Jackson, you know, when players aren't open, what is he going to do? Either buy time for guys to get open, or he's going to tuck and run. And he does have a history with being a little bit loosey-goosey with the football. So maybe Josh Allen can come around that edge, have Lamar Jackson breaking outside the pocket, and then, bow, punch that football out. Lamar Jackson fumbles, and Jacksonville gets an extra possession. And like I said earlier, you slow down this run game, Baltimore becomes a one-dimensional team. This passing attack against this secondary that's kind of ball hawking, you like their chances being able to come away with a couple of key interceptions late in the fourth quarter. The team I'm taking to win, I'm going with Baltimore. I would have trusted Jacksonville to win this game if they weren't as volatile. If they were a more consistent team and they played their best football consistently on a week-to-week basis, I would have more confidence in them being able to pull off this win. Now, I'm not confident that this is a lock for the Ravens to win this game. If you had to ask me my confidence level about the Ravens pulling off this W on the scale of 1 through 5, I probably got to go 3. There's no denying that the Jaguars have a good enough team to win this game. And you got Trevor Lawrence. And when Trevor Lawrence is on, he's good enough to lead you to a win against anybody. But the problem with the Jaguars is that they just are too volatile. And it has nothing to do with them not having the talent and them having injuries. It has everything to do with them just shooting themselves in the foot. And the Ravens, with them being the best team in the AFC right now and them playing their best football, I like the Ravens to continue to win. I think they beat the Jaguars 34-27 is my final score prediction for this game.